record label executives have been getting it wrong since the beginning of the music business, passing on songs that went on to sell tens of millions of copies, dismissing recordings that eventually became standards, turning away artists who rewrote the commercial map of popular music. Some of the most celebrated songs in history were rejected before anyone believed in them. Here are 10 songs record labels rejected that became global hits. Number 10, Don't Stop Believin' by Journey, 1981. Journey had been a successful, album-oriented rock band throughout the late 1970s, but Columbia Records had genuine concerns about Escape, the album that contained Don't Stop Believin', and about the commercial viability of a song that opened with a piano figure and spent 4 minutes building toward its refrain, rather than establishing one early. That kind of patient construction ran directly against standard radio programming logic. The band's management fought internally to get the album released in the form Journey had intended. Don't Stop Believin' was not Columbia's priority single from the album. Other tracks were pushed first. When it was eventually released as a single in October of 1981, it reached number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. That was a solid result, but it only hints at what was coming. The song's real commercial trajectory played out over decades. Its use in the final scene of The Sopranos in June 2007, the screen going to black mid-verse, reignited the recording for a generation that hadn't been born when it was made. It became the best-selling digital catalog single in history, outselling every pre-digital era song ever released on download platforms. Columbia Records had reservations about a song that would eventually outperform the entire catalog of most artists they were simultaneously promoting. The song's trajectory is one of the more striking examples of a recording that outgrew the decade it was made in. Most hit singles from 1981 are remembered by people who were alive in 1981. Don't Stop Believin' is known by people born 30 years later. Journey's lead singer Steve Perry has said in various interviews that he did not fully understand the scale of what the song had become until he saw the reaction it produced in arenas full of people who weren't alive when it was recorded. That is a different category of achievement from a conventional hit, and it is the category that Columbia Records almost prevented by hesitating over whether the structure was radio-friendly enough. Number 9, Waterloo by ABBA, 1974. Before ABBA was ABBA, the 4 members, Agnetha Fältskog, Björn Ulvaeus, Benny Andersson, and Annie Frid Lyngstad, submitted material to several Swedish record companies. The labels passed. Swedish A and R departments in the early 1970s were skeptical that a Swedish pop group singing in English had serious commercial potential in international markets. The domestic market could be reached in Swedish. Why English? Why bother with the international? Polar Music, the label founded by their manager Stig Andersson, eventually agreed to release the recording and entered it into the 1974 Eurovision Song Contest representing Sweden. Waterloo won. The specific combination of the glam rock arrangement, the direct melodic hook, and the historical conceit, Napoleon's surrender at Waterloo used as an analogy for romantic capitulation, communicated something that crossed borders in the way Swedish labels had doubted was possible. Waterloo reached number 1 in the United Kingdom and number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States. The Eurovision win gave ABBA the international platform the Swedish labels had dismissed. The contest was watched by an estimated 500 million people across Europe, meaning commercial breakthrough arrived simultaneously across an entire continent. Total ABBA album sales are estimated at over 400 million worldwide. The labels that passed on Waterloo were declining to sign the best-selling Swedish act in the history of recorded music. The Mamma Mia stage musical, built entirely on ABBA's catalog, opened in London in 1999 and ran for 14 years in the West End. 2 feature film adaptations followed. The 2021 album Voyage, the group's first studio material in 40 years, reached number 1 in 30 countries. The long tail of ABBA's commercial durability from 1974 to the present is a demonstration that the Swedish labels who heard Waterloo and passed were not simply wrong about one record, but about one of the most resilient catalogs in popular music history. Number 8, Shake It Off by Taylor Swift, 2014. Taylor Swift had been signed to Big Machine Records since 2005 and had built one of the most commercially successful careers in country and crossover pop before the question arose, could she cross fully into mainstream pop? The skepticism within the industry was real and sustained. Several advisors recommended a transitional approach, retain some country elements, test pop territory gradually, don't abandon the base audience all at once. Swift and her collaborators rejected that approach and made 1989 as a straight pop record. Republic Records and Universal Music Group were the commercial partners for the project. The internal doubts about whether a country star could make this jump at this scale were significant even from people who had watched her career and believed in her talent. Shake It Off was released on August 18, 2014, and reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, spending 4 weeks there. 1989 sold 1.287 million copies in its first week, the fastest-selling album in over a decade. It won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year in 2016. Swift subsequently re-recorded the album as 1989, Taylor's version, in 2023, following a dispute over ownership of her original masters. The re-recorded version also debuted at #1, making her one of the very few artists to take the same album to the top of the charts twice. The doubts about the pop transition were answered with a finality that left no room for reinterpretation. The broader context of Swift's career arc, the country debut at 16, the crossover success, the full pop transition on 1989, and then the dispute over her masters that led to the re-recording project, makes the label hesitation over the transition even more instructive in retrospect. The industry's caution about whether audiences would follow was based on a model of how audiences behave that Swift's actual audience proceeded to disprove comprehensively. The conventional wisdom was that genre transitions cost artists their core audience without guaranteeing a new one. Swift's core audience followed her into pop without hesitation, and the pop audience she gained in the process was considerably larger than what she had left behind. The theory that transitions were commercially dangerous was not wrong as a general principle. It had held for enough artists that it constituted real caution rather than simple timidity. It was wrong specifically about Swift, because the specific relationship she had built with her audience was not genre-dependent in the way that the industry model assumed. They followed. They followed across genres, across decades, and across re-recorded versions of albums they had already bought once. #7. Respect by Aretha Franklin, 1967. Otis Redding wrote and recorded Respect in 1965 for Volt Records, a Stax subsidiary. Atlantic Records producer Jerry Wexler suggested to Aretha Franklin that she record it, and Franklin's version, recorded in New York in January 1967, transformed the song in ways that Redding himself later acknowledged had made it entirely hers. She reversed the gender dynamic of the original, changed the emphasis throughout, added the RESPECT spelling breakdown, and restructured the backing vocal arrangement in ways that made the recording something categorically different from the source material. Several Atlantic executives had reservations about releasing a cover version of a commercially placed Stax recording, worried it would be received as derivative. Wexler overrode the concerns and released it anyway. Respect reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in April 1967, spending 2 weeks at the top, and simultaneously reached #1 on the R&B chart. Otis Redding, who died in a plane crash in December 1967 at the age of 26, had publicly acknowledged that Franklin had taken complete ownership of the song. It was later ranked #5 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. The Atlantic executives who were cautious about it were cautious about one of the 5 greatest songs ever recorded. Franklin went on to win 18 competitive Grammy Awards during her career, more than any other female artist in Grammy history at the time. She died in August 2018 at the age of 76. The recording of Respect has been used at presidential inaugurations, at civil rights commemorations, at moments of national significance, and at celebrations across 5 decades. It is the kind of recording that doesn't belong to any particular year or moment. It belongs to any moment where the thing it is asking for is relevant, which has proven to be every moment since 1967. Number 6, Yesterday by the Beatles, 1965. Paul McCartney woke up with a melody in his head in 1964 that he was convinced he had heard somewhere before. He played it for everyone around him, asking if they recognized it, certain he had unconsciously reproduced someone else's composition. Nobody recognized it. He eventually accepted it was his own and spent months completing the lyric. The working title was Scrambled Eggs until the words were finished. George Martin and EMI executives had reservations about releasing the finished recording as a UK single, partly because it featured only McCartney and a string quartet. No Ringo Starr, no John Lennon, no George Harrison, no electric instruments. It was a departure from the established Beatles sound significant enough to give the label pause. It was released as a single in the United States in September 1965 and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, staying there for 4 weeks. In the United Kingdom, EMI declined to release it as a single at all. It appeared only on the Help album. Yesterday has since been recorded by more than 2,200 different artists, a figure the Guinness World Records recognizes as the most covered song in the history of recorded music. Artists from Frank Sinatra to Marvin Gaye to Boys the Sexu. Men have recorded versions. Paul McCartney has performed it at every major concert for 60 years. The EMI executives who declined to release it as a UK single were being cautious about the most covered song in history. The logic of their caution is not difficult to reconstruct. The established Beatles sound was one of the most commercially reliable formulas in the history of the British music industry. Departing from it introduced variables that the label's commercial team had no reliable way to predict. A full band performance with electric instruments was what the Beatles were. It was what the audience expected and what the radio system was built around. A solo McCartney vocal over a string quartet was something else, and something else was a risk. Departing from it, removing the band, removing the electric instruments, presenting McCartney alone with a string quartet, introduced variables that couldn't be predicted. The song made those variables irrelevant. The specific quality of what McCartney had written was strong enough to transcend every standard commercial consideration, which is what great songs do, and what A and R departments cannot always see coming. Number 5, Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, 1975. When Queen presented Bohemian Rhapsody to EMI Records, the label's commercial division wanted it cut down. At nearly 6 minutes with a structure that moved through 3 completely distinct sections, ballad, operatic, hard rock, and with no conventional chorus, EMI's position was that radio programmers would refuse to play it and that releasing it as a single was commercially indefensible. DJ Kenny Everett at Capitol Radio was given a copy with explicit instructions not to play it before the official release date. He played it anyway, 14 times in 2 days. The listener response was immediate and overwhelming. EMI released it unchanged. Bohemian Rhapsody spent 9 weeks at number 1 on the UK singles chart in 1975. After Freddie Mercury's death in November 1991, it was re-released and reached number 1 again, with proceeds going to HIV and AIDS research charity. After the 2018 biographical film Bohemian Rhapsody, which won 4 Academy Awards, streaming numbers for the original recording reached levels that made it the most streamed song of the 20th century on Spotify. The executive who told Queen to shorten it is not remembered. The unshortened recording is, Queen recorded the track at Rockfield Studio in Wales and at SARM Studios in London, accumulating over 180 separate vocal overdubs to build the operatic section. The tape was reportedly approaching its physical limit for saturation by the time the harmonies were complete. Brian May played his homemade red special guitar through a series of Vox AC30 amplifiers for the hard rock finale. Freddie Mercury died in November 1991 from AIDS-related pneumonia, one day after publicly confirming his diagnosis. He was 45 years old. The recordings he made in the 17 years between Bohemian Rhapsody and his death represent one of the most complete and durable catalogs in rock music history. Number 4, Sultans of Swing by Dire Straits, 1978. Mark Knopfler wrote Sultans of Swing, and Dire Straits shopped demos to the major UK labels through the mid-1970s. Every label passed. The band recorded an improved demo, entered it into a BBC radio competition, and it was selected for broadcast. A Phonogram Records executive heard it on the BBC and signed the band. The mechanism that connected the song to its first commercial partner was a radio competition that the A&R system had already bypassed. The industry's formal gatekeeping process had failed, and an informal route carried the song through instead. What every label heard when they received the demo and chose not to pursue, it was a recording that sounded unlike what commercial rock radio was playing in the mid-1970s. Knopfler's finger-picking style, the jazzy sophistication of the chord changes, the specific narrative quality of the lyric, a snapshot of a real jazz band he had seen playing in a bar in London, sat outside the commercial templates that label A&R departments were working from. It was something genuinely new, and new things are harder to evaluate than variations on established successes. Every label that passed was applying reasonable criteria to an unreasonable situation. Sultans of Swing was released as a single in February 1978 in the United Kingdom on Vertigo Records. In the United States, it reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1979. The Dire Straits' debut album eventually sold over 3 million copies. The labels who had passed on the demo were passing on the opening of a catalog that would later produce Brothers in Arms, 1985, which sold over 30 million copies worldwide and became the first album to sell 1 million copies on compact disc. Knopfler's finger-picking guitar style, playing without a pick, using the flesh of his fingers to generate a specific warmth and articulation, was immediately identifiable and immediately influential. The labels that heard the original demo and passed were hearing something genuinely new. That is always the hardest thing to recognize. Something genuinely new sounds wrong before it sounds right, and by the time it sounds right, the people who passed on it have moved on to the next thing they are about to get wrong. Number 3. Waterloo Sunset by the Kinks, 1967. Waterloo Sunset, I am in paradise. Ray Davies wrote Waterloo Sunset, and their label Pie Records was uncertain about releasing it. The song's specific quality, a narrator watching couples on Waterloo Bridge in London from a quiet remove, feeling something between contentment and loneliness, was precisely the kind of emotional restraint and local specificity that commercial departments in 1967 worried would limit a record's international reach. Davies faced pressure to add production elements, to make it more immediate, to adjust it toward what was charting. He resisted all of it. The song was released in May 1967 and reached number 2 on the UK singles chart. Pie's concern about its international reach proved partly accurate in the United States. It did not make a significant commercial impact there. In the United Kingdom, it has been voted consistently among the greatest British songs ever made. The BBC named it the best song about London in a 2009 survey. Q magazine ranked it the 10th best British song ever recorded in 1998. Davies is now regarded as one of the finest British songwriters of the 20th century. The Kinks were one of the central British invasion bands and one of its most consistently undervalued, always more interested in what a song could say than in what a song could sell. Pie Records' hesitation over Waterloo Sunset was rooted in the assumption that the market wanted something more immediate. The market kept returning instead to the quiet, specific song that the label almost refused to release. The quality that Pie perceived as a commercial limitation, the song's restraint, its refusal to reach for easy emotion, is precisely why it remains essential 60 years after its release, while the more commercially calculated recordings of that same season have not. Waterloo Sunset, I am in paradise. Number 2. Jolene by Dolly Parton, 1973. Dolly Parton wrote Jolene, and there was internal hesitation at RCA Victor about whether a song directly addressed to a romantic rival, positioning Parton in a place of acknowledged vulnerability, was the right commercial move for a country star in 1973. Country music's expectations for female artists included a degree of composure and strength that openly pleading with a rival seemed to undercut. Parton recorded it anyway, The name Jolene came from a young fan who had asked for an autograph at a performance. Parton thought it was a beautiful name, held onto it, and built the song around an entirely fictional situation she had imagined rather than experienced. The emotional truth of the song, however, was not fictional. The fear of losing someone you love to someone else and the specific powerlessness that comes with that fear was something Parton knew well enough to write with total conviction. Jolene was released in October 1973 and reached #1 on the Billboard country chart in February 1974, Parton's first #1 country single.
Jolene, 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 Jolene.
The song has been covered by hundreds of artists across multiple genres and across 5 decades. A version by Beyoncé appeared on the 2024 country-influenced album Cowboy Carter, bringing it to a new global audience 50 years after the original recording. The original has accumulated over 2 billion streams on Spotify. The commercial concern that the song was too specific and too vulnerable proved to be exactly backwards. The specificity of Jolene is what made it connect, and the vulnerability is what has made it impossible to leave behind. Parton has said in interviews that the song's emotional directness came from a genuine place. Not the specific situation of a rival, which was invented, but the underlying feeling of loving someone and fearing that love is not enough to hold them. That quality of genuine emotional exposure is the thing that makes a song last across decades and genres. The commercial department that hesitated over it was hesitating over the exact quality that made it permanent.
Jolene, 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 Jolene.
#1, Rocket Man, I Think It's Going to Be a Long, Long Time, by Elton John, 1972. Bernie Taupin wrote the lyric for Rocket Man first, drawing on a Ray Bradbury short story, and Elton John set it to music. The song was offered to other artists before John recorded it himself. Dick James, who ran DJM Records and had a commercial relationship with John going back to his earliest recordings, had concerns about the song's length, its unusual subject matter, and whether a recording built around an astronaut's psychological isolation had the kind of mainstream appeal that built careers. Dick James was persuaded to release it. Rocket Man was released on April 14, 1972, and reached #2 on the UK singles chart and #6 on the Billboard Hot 100. It became one of the defining recordings of Elton John's career and one of the most recognizable songs of the decade. John performed it at every major concert throughout the 1970s and has continued to perform it for 50 years since its release. The recording that Dick James nearly did not put out has outlasted every commercial reservation that was raised against it. The concern about whether audiences would follow the astronaut metaphor was wrong in the way that most label concerns about great songs are wrong. It assumed the audience was listening for the surface content rather than for the emotional truth underneath it. The loneliness in Rocket Man is not about space. It uses space travel as a frame for the specific feeling of being separated from the people you love by work and distance and time. That is not a niche feeling. It never was. Elton John's catalog has sold over 300 million records worldwide. Rocket Man is one of the recordings that established the specific quality of the John and Taupin partnership. The ability to take an unusual conceptual premise and load it with emotional content that translates directly to an enormous audience. Dick James had the song, had reservations, released it anyway, and it became one of the most important recordings of the decade. The label executives who get these decisions wrong are not remembered. The songs are. Dick James Music, the publishing company that James ran, controlled the rights to John and Taupin's early catalog. A dispute over ownership of those rights led to a legal separation between John and James in the 1980s. That was painful for both parties. James died in February 1986. The specific irony of a man who had nearly not released Rocket Man also controlling the publishing rights to it for the first decade of its existence is one of the more complicated footnotes in the recording's history. The Elton John and Bernie Taupin collaboration produced an extraordinary run of albums between 1970 and 1976. Tumbleweed Connection, Madman Across the Water, Honky Chateau, Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, and Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. That represents one of the most concentrated periods of simultaneous commercial and critical success in the history of popular music. Rocket Man was the opening statement of that run's most productive stretch. Every label concerned about whether the astronaut metaphor was too conceptual, too distant from ordinary experience, too strange for mainstream radio, was dissolved by an audience that was not listening for the surface at all. If any of these surprised you, hit the like button and subscribe. There are more stories like this one waiting.